If you're like me, you're completely locked in during the NFL draft process, following every report, news segment, and update. The draft is always changing. One day, a player is seen as a top pick, and the next, their stock takes a hit. Take Mason Graham, for example. Some analysts initially predicted he'd be a top 2 or top 3 pick, calling him a generational talent. But when you actually watch his game tape, it doesn't always match the hype. Now we're seeing his stock drop as people realize he might not even be the best defensive tackle in this class, maybe not even the best on his own team. Then there's James Pierce Jr. and Mike Green. Their film looks impressive, but there are serious character concerns surrounding them, which could impact their draft position. And let's talk about offensive tackles. Our top-ranked tackle has officially changed. Early in the process, Josh Connerly was considered OT1. He's still a top 3 or top 4 guy and should go in the first round, but I'm now convinced that Missouri's Armand Mabou is the best tackle in this class. I actually did a film breakdown of Mabou on the Football Scout channel. Check the comments for the link if you want to see it. He reminds me a lot of Darnell Wright. His technique is just on another level. His ability to fake jump sets, snatch, and trap defenders makes him stand out. His tape is really impressive. But as we know, things in the draft change constantly. Remember how a month before the draft, guys like Kyrie Jackson saw their stock skyrocket? Meanwhile, others like Deion Jones were once projected as top 10 picks, but ended up falling to the 4th round. That's just how unpredictable this process is. One of the latest shakeups involves Mel Kiper's take on Shedeur Sanders. Not long ago, Sanders was considered a potential first-round pick, maybe even QB1. Now, according to Kiper, some teams don't even have him on their draft board anymore. He discussed this on the First Draft podcast with Field Yates, saying that Cam Ward is now seen as the top quarterback in the class. This kind of shift isn't surprising. It happens almost every year. Remember last year when people thought Jaden Daniels was a second-rounder? Things change fast in the NFL draft, and we're just getting started. Things in the NFL draft change constantly, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. Just last year, people thought Michael Penix Jr. might go in the 5th round. Then the actual draft came, and that didn't happen. Now we're seeing a shift at the top. Cam Ward has emerged as the consensus number. One quarterback, and honestly, it's not surprising if you've watched his tape. He's impressive. He makes all the right throws, gets the ball out on time, and places it exactly where it needs to be. His accuracy and decision-making stand out. After Mel Kiper made that point, he also shared something interesting about Shedeur Sanders. According to sources around the league, Shedeur no longer fits the mold of what NFL teams want in a quarterback. The general feeling is that he's not fast or mobile enough to escape pressure the way teams expect modern quarterbacks to. But here's my take. I don't think a quarterback has to be a great runner to succeed. Some of the best in the league, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, can beat defenses from the pocket with their arm. However, the difference is that those guys can read the field quickly, make the right decisions, and deliver the ball accurately under pressure. That's where the concerns with Shedeur come in. When you watch his tape, you'll notice he's often late with his reads. He struggles to progress from his first and second options to his third and fourth. Sometimes there are wide-open receivers downfield, and he just doesn't pull the trigger. If a quarterback isn't mobile, they need to process the game quickly and make sharp, decisive throws. Shedeur hasn't shown that ability consistently. I've had Cam Ward as my QB1 for months now, and I know my take on Shedeur isn't popular. I've taken plenty of heat for it, and I'm sure some of you will disagree in the comments. But at the end of the day, I stand by my opinion. Even if the Raiders draft him, which I doubt, they'll have to deal with his struggles in reading defenses and delivering accurate throws under pressure. I know some people will point to Shedeur Sanders' completion percentage as proof that he's an accurate quarterback, but stats like that don't tell the whole story. In the NFL, true accuracy isn't just about completion percentage, it's about ball placement. There's a huge difference between completing short screen passes and consistently hitting throws 30 to 40 yards downfield in the perfect spot. That being said, Mel Kiper's report is definitely interesting. Despite the concerns, I wouldn't be shocked if Shedeur still goes in the first round. Teams tend to take chances on quarterbacks with potential, even if they have flaws. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Looking ahead, next year's quarterback class is expected to be stronger. So if you're a team like the Raiders or Giants in desperate need of a quarterback, you might be better off going with a veteran option. Instead of taking a risky first-round quarterback this year, it could make more sense to bring in someone like Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, or Matthew Stafford. But enough about that. Let's shift our focus to the upcoming NFL Combine, which is just a week away. There are some absolute freak athletes in this class, and I can't wait to see what they do. Some of these guys could end up breaking records, and I've got a list of names to go through. I won't cover every single one, but I do want to highlight a few that stand out. If you remember Montez Sweat, he was a massive, powerful defensive end who shocked everyone by running a ridiculous 4.43 or 4.44 in the 40-yard dash. This year, we've got some similar freak athletes who could put up insane numbers. One name to watch is Shedeur Stewart. I have a bold take on him. There's a real chance he could end up as the number one, first overall pick in this draft. Now, I know some people will think that's crazy, but hear me out. Early in the draft process, his Texas A&M teammate, Nick Scorton, was getting all the hype. People were talking about him as a top 10 pick, but over time, that narrative has shifted. Stewart has now passed Scorton in most rankings, and some scouts believe he has the potential to be the top pick based on his size and athleticism. If you haven't watched Stewart's tape yet, go check it out. He was measured at the Senior Bowl at 6 feet 5 inches, 281 pounds. That's bigger than 90% of defensive ends in the league. That kind of size, combined with his explosiveness, makes him a serious contender for the top spot in the draft. When you look at a player like Shedeur Stewart, you won't find many guys his size, 6 feet 5 inches and over 280 pounds, who can move the way he does. The only player that comes to mind as a comparison is Myles Garrett. Stewart's explosiveness is on another level. This isn't a Tyree Wilson situation. Wilson was quick for his size, but Stewart is on a different level. He's faster, twitchier, and has much better bend, which is why some believe he could be the number first overall pick. That said, I still think Abdul Carter has the better tape and has been more productive. However, Carter is much smaller, likely around 6 feet 2 inches, 240 pounds, if that. Stewart, on the other hand, has the frame and power to dominate both as a run stopper and a pass rusher, especially if he continues to develop his technique. Right now, his fundamentals need work, but they're already better than Tyree Wilson's were coming out of college. I believe Stewart has the potential to be a top 5 pick, and if he runs anywhere between a 4.3 and 4.49 in the 40-yard dash, I'd be shocked if he doesn't go that high. I know this is a bold take, but the NFL has shown time and time again that teams will prioritize size, speed, and raw athleticism over pure production. Just look at past drafts. Teams took Tyree Wilson over Jalen Carter and Travon Walker over other more productive prospects. Size and explosiveness always catch the eye of NFL front offices. Another player to watch at the NFL Combine is Abdul Carter. Since he wasn't at the Senior Bowl, this will be our first chance to get official measurements on his height, weight, and 40-yard dash time. Travis Hunter is another exciting name. Seeing his numbers will be interesting as well. One of the more intriguing prospects for me is Jordan Burch. He's an extremely athletic player who actually started out as a defensive end before transferring to Oregon. The buzz around him is that he's bulked up significantly, reportedly adding about 25 pounds over the last 2 years. A couple of years ago, he was listed around 6 feet 4 inches, 265 pounds. Now, he's set to be closer to 295. That's a massive transformation, and I'm curious to see how it impacts his performance at the Combine. While his tape isn't overly impressive, his physical attributes make him an interesting prospect to keep an eye on. Another player I'm eager to see tested is Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. This guy is huge, an absolute monster on the defensive line. Some people even think he's better than Mason Graham. I'm not sure I agree with that, but there's no denying his productivity. I would be shocked if he falls past the second round. If he somehow slips into the third, it would be one of the biggest surprises of the draft. Another player to keep an eye on is Ty Williams out of Ohio State. For those who don't know, I used to work as a Hula Bowl scout. As part of that role, I had access to reports from BLESTO, one of the main scouting services that the NFL and its teams use. These agencies gather in-depth measurements and evaluations at events like the Hula Bowl, and they also rank prospects based on their performances and potential. Before this season, Ty Williams was ranked as a top 5 player by Blesto, which means that his tape from the previous year was impressive enough to catch the attention of NFL scouts and evaluators early on. Another highly rated player entering the season was Luther Burden, who was actually the number one overall prospect according to Blesto. Some analysts still view Burden as a top 10 pick, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. He's an incredibly talented player with a lot of upside. Tedairoa McMillan is another prospect I'm excited to see at the NFL Combine. There's been a lot of talk about him being 6 feet 5 inches, but is he really? The Combine will give us official measurements to confirm both his height and weight, along with his speed. Some players already had a chance to showcase their skills at the Senior Bowl, such as Ennis Rakestraw Jr. Meanwhile, another name to watch is James Pierce Jr. There's some debate about whether he's actually 6 feet 5 inches or a bit shorter, and there are also some character concerns that teams might scrutinize. However, when it comes to production, his tape doesn't lie. Statistically, he was the most dominant defensive end in college football this past season. Another intriguing prospect is Charles Grant. He was initially expected to participate in the Senior Bowl but didn't end up attending. The big questions for him are whether he's truly 6 feet 4 inches and what his arm length measurements will be. Those measurements are critical in determining if he can play tackle at the next level. His tape is strong, so his physical measurements will play a key role in his draft evaluation. Speaking of offensive linemen, Arnold Malk is another prospect I've discussed before. He's known for his incredible strength, and now we have official numbers. He measured in at 6 feet 3.5 inches with a 34-inch wingspan at the Senior Bowl. Some scouts might say that 6 feet 3.5 inches is too short for an offensive tackle, but I completely disagree. If the difference between him and a 6'4" lineman is just half an inch, that's insignificant. The key factor for tackles is arm length, and Mock's measurements check out. If you watch his tape, you'll see him dominate some of the best defensive linemen in the country, including Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Landon Jackson from Arkansas. I'm excited to see his performance at the Combine, particularly in the bench press, to get a better sense of his overall strength. Lastly, there are a few speedsters I'm eager to watch, including Travis Hunter. His 40-yard dash time will be one of the most anticipated results of the entire Combine. One of the biggest storylines to follow at the NFL Combine will be Travis Hunter's official measurements. Personally, I believe Hunter should play wide receiver, and I've voiced this opinion on Twitter before. I'll reiterate it here. Cornerback is a system position. A great coach like Bill Belichick can take an unknown fifth-round cornerback and turn him into a star, just like he did with guys like J.C. Jackson and Malcolm Butler. Hunter, however, is a playmaker with the ball in his hands. While he could be a great cornerback, unless he's on the level of Jalen Ramsey, which I don't believe he is, his biggest impact will be as a wide receiver. His size, weight, and 40-yard dash time will be key indicators, but I see him thriving on offense. From a fantasy football perspective, if Hunter is drafted as a receiver, I'm taking him with the first overall pick in my dynasty league. On the other hand, if he plays cornerback, I won't touch him. Another player I'm watching is Ashton Jeanty. If he ends up on a team with a strong offensive line, like the Cowboys, he could be a major fantasy asset. Now, moving on to a couple of under-the-radar prospects. Bash Tatum from Virginia Tech is someone to watch. Some scouts believe he's a top 3 running back in this class, even though he's not well known yet. He's already ranked ahead of players like Caleb Johnson and even Omarion Hampton from North Carolina on some boards. Some analysts think he could be on the same level as Ashton Jeanty. Tatum's production wasn't eye-popping, but he also didn't get as many touches as other top backs. The real test will be his 40-yard dash. If he runs in the 4.3-second range, his stock could skyrocket. Reports suggest he was clocked at 23 miles per hour and ran a 4.32-second 40-yard dash during the offseason, which is an insane number. If he replicates that at the Combine, teams will take notice. Another wide receiver to watch is Isaiah Bond. Some believe he could sneak into the first round, and I tend to agree, though his 40-yard dash will play a big role in that. His size might push him up draft boards as well. A team like the Dolphins, especially if they lose Tyreek Hill, could target him for his speed. We've seen teams like the Chiefs prioritize speed in the draft, selecting Xavier Worthy early. Similarly, the Colts took Adonai Mitchell, another speedster from Texas, shortly after. The last player, and the one I'm most excited to see, is Arian Smith, a wide receiver from Georgia. There's a lot of buzz that he might break the 40-yard dash record at the Combine. Last year, Xavier Worthy set the mark at 4.21 seconds, and some believe Smith has the potential to top that. Georgia has a history of producing receivers who weren't necessarily dominant in college, but became strong NFL players. We saw this with Brock Bowers, George Pickens, and even Ladd McConkey, who was drafted by the Chargers. Smith could follow that path. Beyond the receivers, we also have some intriguing quarterback prospects in this draft class. Shedeur Sanders will be a fascinating player to track as the draft process unfolds, along with Cameron Ward and Jackson Dart. Dart, in particular, has seen his stock skyrocket recently. That wraps it up for now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next breakdown.